Meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to this month's edition of Brown Bagging It in My Backyard. I'm your host, Harvey Webster. And those of you who don't know, this is a monthly Zoom program that serves to engage our audiences with native biodiversity, advance conservation efforts through our region, encourage the creation of native backyard habitats. So we're here to educate, to inspire, perhaps entertain just a little bit, but most importantly, to empower. And this is part of an initiative called Nature in My Backyard, which in itself is also part of the larger organization called Ohio Native Plants. And I encourage you to go to ohionativeplants.org to find out about all of the good work that this organization is doing regionally and statewide. And the if you haven't been to the website, just the whole notion of having an interactive map of the state of Ohio showing all of the nurseries and garden centers that sell native plants is outstanding, along with a profile of what plants they offer and do they use pesticides or herbicides, or it's a really great resource, highly interactive and very useful. Now, just I have to put a shameless plug in for Ohio Native Plants and for Nature in My Backyard, and that is that we rely exclusively on donations. As we try and leverage all of the good work of this organization, uh, Jane Ellison and Wendy Donkin and the whole team are putting in lots and lots of extra hours. So if you feel that you want to join our efforts as a volunteer, absolutely. But also, if you'd like to support us financially, go to Ohio Native Plants and you can give conveniently and securely on that platform, and we would be most appreciative of that. Um, One of the unique features about Nature in My Backyard is the fact that we have teams of volunteer master gardeners who, by invitation, can come to your yard and take you through the steps of how to identify the invasive species and then suggest alternatives, with the whole idea of creating a biodiverse, healthy backyard. And to date, Jane was just sharing the numbers with me. Since the inception of this program 3 years ago, there's been 500 site visits that have been conducted. And the great majority have been, the teams have been manned by volunteers from Cuyahoga County Master Gardeners. So we've got to give a big shout out to the Master Gardeners, Cuyahoga County, the great work that they're doing. And also a shout out the fact that they do a wonderful fall seminar. It's on September 26th. And look into finding out more about that and the programs that they're going to be offering for all good stuff. Next month in our series, we will be convening on August 12th at noon, and we're going to learn about ferns. Steve McKee, who for many of you probably remember, I think he splits his time now between Ohio and Utah, but he was director of the Richland County Park District for 35 years. Great naturalist across the board, but he'll be giving a program called In the Garden with Some Good Fronds, garden-worthy native ferns. So look forward to that. So great stuff. Find out more about this organization called Ohio Native Plants and Nature in My Backyard. A lot of really great work is being done here. Now, for those of you who have tuned in for our programs, you know that there's a common theme behind all of our presenters. And that is, it's the power and the passion of individuals who are drawn to nature, usually through some intimate experience or exposure, and then how they become devoted students, citizen scientists, rigorous observers, and passionate advocates of the natural world. Many without one class in environmental science. Their curiosity drives their passion, and their passion drives their curiosity. And today's speaker is no exception to that. Mary Lynn Delfino is our speaker today. And I was having a chat with her yesterday, and she said that, she's from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where she grew up. And her line was, nature was just not part of her upbringing. So I guess I don't know what that exactly means, Mary Lynn, but maybe you can elaborate. But coming from Scranton, she actually went to school at Marywood University, was a communications major, and perhaps her love of grammar might lead into her spark moment. And I'm not going to steal her thunder from that, and I'll let her tell you about it. But ultimately, she moves to Ohio for graduate school at the University of Dayton, and focuses on pastoral ministry. But somewhere along the line, about 10 years ago, she has that spark moment. And as she uses a wonderful expression that I'm sure she used a lot today, called a moment that became made her nature aware. And since that time, she has loved butterflies, and butterflies have drawn her into the world of nature. And she's become an incredible student and passionate advocate. She's a part of a crew down at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park that does butterfly surveys, and the rigorous and meticulous data collection that happens there. She was telling me that she went to a butterfly festival in Texas and ran into someone, and they said they knew all about the butterfly monitoring of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and actually cited it in some of their programs. So those data sets were really important, and she felt very good about, number one, being a part of that. But she's developed an interest and an expertise as a passionate advocate and avocational interest. She's employed by Kent State University now, and she has her background in marketing, communications, and recruitment. But her passion is butterflies, and we are really fortunate today because she's going to share some of that passion with us and talk about butterflying in my backyard. And with that, and without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mary Lynn Delfino. Welcome, Mary Lynn.
Oh, thank you so much, Harvey, for that amazing introduction. I'm so grateful to be here. I also want to thank Jane and Wendy for their invitations and their support. And I just love what this organization is doing. And I'm happy to present today here on Zoom. So thanks to everyone who's joined us today for taking time out of your day. We have people joining us. I was kind of going through the participant list from Florida and Pennsylvania and Maine. And so, welcome to Ohio virtually. And I'll just get right into the presentation. There's a lot to share, a lot of good photos, a lot of good information. And someone mentioned some entertainment value, and that will certainly come into it because I just can't help myself. Um, the title of my talk today is Butterflying in My Backyard. And I really struggled with, what do I call this program? Butterflying in my backyard? Butterflying in your backyard? And really, I think I should probably just change it to Butterflying in Our Backyard. Because really, what we're trying to do and what this organization promotes and so many others is trying to stitch together habitats, stitch together our yards, our spaces, by planting native species and being attuned and attentive to those environments so that we can truly build that homegrown national park that Doug Tallamy so often and eloquently speaks about. Um, but we'll stick with butterflying in my backyard since I'll be showing you some photos of butterflies that have come to my Cleveland Heights estate, if you will. So I've lived in Cleveland Heights for almost 5 years now. I bought a house here July 26th, 2021. And home ownership has definitely come with its share of challenges, like burst pipes on Christmas morning. No, that is not Santa coming down the chimney. But owning a home and having some property has enabled me to build and create the native habitat that I would like so that I could take that butterfly joy that I experienced in the field in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park or down in Mission, Texas, or Costa Rica, or Italy, wherever I go to butterfly. I wanted that butterfly joy really right outside my doorstep, which I can do. I can go out in my pajamas and stand on my front porch and observe, and it is wonderful. So a lot of people ask, Mary Lynn, how did you get into butterflies? Like you seem really obsessed. And my story is such that in May of 2013, Memorial Day weekend, I had a cycling accident and I went over the handlebars. I broke my elbow. I was off my horse for 3 months. I had a job at the time where I had summers off, so I really was, down and out, if you could say. Um, but what that caused me to do was to slow down. And I went for more walks and more hikes as I healed and recovered. And I was so fortunate to have, within walking distance of my home in Kent, access to the Portage Hike and Bike Trail, which goes along the Cuyahoga River. And there I just started noticing things. I was nature aware at that point, but not really super into any one thing. Had a friend who was really into birds, and I was like, that's cool, but I don't know if I'm really into birds. But so I just start noticing all kinds of things, and I start taking pictures, insects and spiders and birds, of course, black squirrels, because it's Kent and they're famous for their black squirrels, and of course, butterflies. So, fast forward to the next year, 2014, I happened to be home in Scranton for a visit. And my friend and I decided we're going to take a little day trip to Jim Thorpe, which is a historic, quaint little downtown in the Pocono Mountains. And of course, my friend is like, I don't know what we should do. You pick. I love that. So I went on TripAdvisor and I found a couple things, including the Bear Mountain Butterfly Sanctuary. And I said, how about we go here, before we get into town and, have lunch or whatever. And she's like, okay. So we go and, we're definitely the oldest people there without kids. We watched the Monarch life cycle video on a very old and tired VHS tape. And then we make our way into the native butterfly habitat. But honestly, I had no idea what a native butterfly even was or why it mattered. I was just excited that we would get to feed monarchs using these sponge brushes, which were dipped in a sugar water and soy sauce solution. And they rear, these monarchs in the house, and cool, that's awesome. But then, I start seeing there's some other butterflies in them, and one of them actually kept landing in my friend's hair. So this butterfly here is the Eastern Kama, and at least that's what the woman at the butterfly house said. I also learned that Jen was afraid of butterflies, so that was also super fun. Maybe, if you're indecisive and someone says, let's go to a butterfly house, maybe you should think differently. But anyway, so the woman in the butterfly house says, this is an Eastern Kama, and she shows me the field mark on the side that sort of resembles like a silver comma. And I was like, huh, I'm intrigued. And then she says, and there's also a question mark butterfly, and shows me the field mark, again, that comma shape, but with a little dot. And then I was hooked. I'm in love now because as Harvey said in my introduction, I was a communications major as an undergrad. I love grammar. I love punctuation. I read books about those topics for fun. I listen to the Grammar Girl podcast. And well, you get the picture. Now, butterflies and communications have now tied in together in my life, and I just have to know more. I have to know everything now. And so the Eastern Kama is indeed my spark butterfly, Polygonia Kama. And, here in this picture, it's one from that butterfly sanctuary resting in my hand. And so I was like, oh, we got to go to the gift shop. I got to get a book. I got to get a field guide. I got to get something. So I buy this little Peterson's guide. It's very basic. It's not even for Ohio or even the Eastern United States, but that doesn't matter. I take that little book home and I start writing down what I'm seeing, when I'm seeing it, where I'm seeing it. I'm doing butterfly recording, even though I haven't even yet found out what a butterfly survey is, which is what I talk about next. So eventually this love of butterflies becomes an obsession. And of course, I can't stop talking about it. My friends who are on this call can certainly attest to that. And a neighbor of mine, late in 2015, said, "Hey, I have a friend who does butterfly monitoring in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park." So she connected us. And then in the spring of 2016, I went to my first butterfly survey at Indigo Lake. But like, many people go, "Well, what's a butterfly survey? What do you do on a butterfly survey?" Well, it's kind of cool. You go out into the field every week, basically April through October, at least here in Ohio, when the weather conditions are right, and you record what butterflies that you see. So at the time, I was very lucky because I still had that job where I had summers off. So I could go every Friday in the summer to Indigo Lake. And then I found out there was another survey at Terra Vista. And so I started going to that one. So now I'm going to 2 butterfly surveys a week. And I find out that the survey at Terra Vista is the longest running in the state of Ohio. And I thought that was pretty neat. And as Harvey mentioned, I did have an encounter with a woman who has been using our data sets from Ohio. So, how does a person like that get the data? Well, essentially, what we do is I call it a score sheet, and I should have put a picture of it here. I apologize, I just didn't have one handy, but we record all the butterfly species that we see, and it's also broken out into sections. So our transect is like about a 2-mile loop at Terra Vista, and it has 10 different sections, which vary in terms of habitat. Some are sunny, some are shady, some have woodland species, some have more prairie species. And then all that data is collected from our site and all the sites around the state and is sent to the Ohio lepidopterists in Columbus, as well as the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, where scientists and researchers can access that. So actually, it was at the Texas Butterfly Festival where I met one of those people. I was in line for the buffet. She saw I was from Ohio. And that's when she told me that she had used our data set. And I was like, this is really cool. I'm contributing to something much bigger than myself. So the other thing I noticed while we were on the survey, of course, I'm like cutting my teeth on butterflies here. I'm trying to learn them. I'm taking pictures. I'm going home. I'm studying, looking things up. But I also noticed that people would mention host plants. "Oh, well, this butterfly likes this host plant," and they would point it out. And that's when I started to realize that this was a match game of sorts. Because to know butterflies is to know plants, really. Not only what they nectar on and feed on, but also the plants that they need to reproduce. And as we know, the butterfly life cycle is very dependent upon host plants. And so I kind of got this idea in my head that I wanted to plant more host plants. I would love to do that. But at the time, I was renting in Kent and I knew that my house was going to be sold. And I just, you know how it is when you rent. You don't really want to invest a lot in a property that you're not going to see the results of. So now I'm, in a house that I own and I have this chance to really build that productive habitat and to have a place where I can nurture life and bring butterfly joy. So today, the question that I'll be answering for every butterfly that I show that has come to my yard is, what has brought this butterfly to my yard? And you can ask yourself the same thing. What has brought this butterfly or, this insect or this bird to my yard? And for butterflies, it's pretty basic, really. They need a place where they can complete their life cycle. So this slide is just a very basic review of the butterfly life cycle. If you're new to butterflies, you still might be learning this. If you are a butterfly enthusiast as I am, and I know there's at least a couple on the call here, Linda Cooper, and Margaret, then, it's always a good little review here that you have 2 adult butterflies, a male and a female. The male and the female mate. The male deposits sperm, which fertilizes the egg. The egg is then, and the female then lays eggs on the host plant, which she finds through a combination of sight and also touch. And in touch really is taste, because she is tasting with her feet to make sure that that is indeed the right place and the right plant. So that egg hatches, becomes a caterpillar, which then eats and eats and eats. We all know the book, The Hungry Little Caterpillar. That is true in real life, of course. It goes through 5 stages or 5 instars. And after the 5th instar, becomes a chrysalis and then emerges after a period of time as an adult butterfly and starts that whole cycle over again. And adults or butterflies do emerge as adults. And I have a kind of a funny story about that later on. So as I was putting together this talk, I thought, geez, Mary Lynn, how many plants have you added? I really probably could have used one of those consultations from Nature in My Backyard because um, in some ways it's been a very, I don't know how you would say it, not a very methodical process. I just see it and I want it. But anyway, I did go out a couple weeks ago and I did some counting now. And I've discovered that my butterfly obsession has really become a native plant obsession now. So now I have 2 obsessions. Um, and, like I said, I did want to bring that butterfly joy home with me that I experienced out in the field. And I knew that I needed to have more than just nectar sources. Butterflies aren't super picky about their nectar sources. They'll nectar on things that are native or not native. I mean, I think butterfly nectaring, they're kind of like teenage boys. They'll like almost eat anything. But it's really those host plants that make a difference. And so you can kind of see an array at the top of this slide of some of the plants that I've added. And I'm trying to be more intentional about planting for all seasons. So thinking about things that bloom or grow in the spring, summer, and fall as well. Um, Now, these 50 plants that I've added do not take into account natives that have popped up because I have removed things that don't belong, like non-native species, invasive species especially. So that was definitely one of the first tasks and an ongoing task here at my Cleveland Heights estate. So some of the non-natives that I've eradicated or am still attempting to eradicate include English ivy, Italian arum, which a lot of people haven't heard of, but if you look it up, you'll see what a nightmare it is. Lily of the valley, mugwort, thistles, hostas, lilies that the deer ate. I don't even know what color they were because I never saw them bloom. And crabgrass, which I also have an interesting story about later, and I might have to rethink my relationship with crabgrass. But removing those invasives has helped other natives to flourish, like violets and Philadelphia fleabane, snakeroot, and various other asters and other plants. And all of this complement a keystone species that I have in my yard, and a lot of my neighbors have in their yards, which are oak trees. So I have a 100-year-old red oak tree, and then its daughter tree, which is big, but not quite as big as the mother tree. And of course, I've kept some non-natives, for sentimental purposes. I think about, the hibiscus that was in bloom when I arrived here after I closed on the house. And, I just can't bring myself to replace it, even though I know like a rose mallow would be a very nice swap for that. So, maybe that will happen at some point. I guess I could like use a free Nature in My Backyard consultation. So that's my free plug to sign up for one and see, maybe what swaps you can make in your yard as well. So in addition to the 50 native plants added, like a good citizen scientist, I've also been keeping track of what butterflies have shown up. And one way that I do this is by photographing and uploading to iNaturalist, which is an app, citizen science app. And so I've officially documented 16 butterfly species here. It's probably 17. There was one evening I was in the backyard and I saw what was either an Eastern comma or a question mark, but I just couldn't get a good enough ID on it. I was working, I didn't have my binoculars out or my, high-powered camera. So we'll say 16 officially and 17 unofficially. So at the top here is a ribbon of some of those butterflies, many of which we're going to talk about today. And of course, I want more. 16 is not enough. I need more. So, but I also probably need to win the lottery so I can just stay at home all day or buy a pollinator cam so I can see what's coming. Because I'm sure that there have been other butterflies that I just haven't seen. It's hard to be outside all day, especially when you have to do this thing called work. But thank you, Kent State, for paying my salary so I can indulge in native plants. And so, when we think about the greater context, in Ohio, there are 137 butterfly species that have been documented. That's according to the ODNR. Now, not all of these appear in Northeast Ohio, of course, and some don't appear at all in any areas of the state. But, 16 out of 137, not too bad. So it's always good to have that context about what is coming and how many. So this is the unofficial list. In case you are interested, these are the 16 butterflies, and I already talked about the 17th, but I didn't list it here because I can't say for sure. The ones that are marked with an asterisk are visitors to Ohio. So they're not reproducing in Ohio. They do not pay the in-state tuition rate. Okay, another higher ed joke. I'm sorry, I'll stop. So my focus today will be on those Ohio residents. Though I have to say, having a common buckeye spotted in my yard in October on blue mist flower was like 10 of 10. I was so excited to have that butterfly visit my yard. So, I'm definitely all about host plants and reproduction, but man, when you get a butterfly like that, it's hard not to be excited. So we'll go into our tour of butterflies in my backyard. And again, the question that I'm answering on each of these slides is what host plant potentially has brought this butterfly to my yard? So you'll see on each slide that those plants are highlighted or bolded so that you could identify them for yourself in case I don't happen to mention it intentionally. But we'll start with the Eastern Tiger Swallowtail. It is probably one of our biggest and most recognizable butterflies, and you've probably seen them, in the woods or maybe even cruising through your neighborhood. This butterfly was perched on my kitchen window screen. It was kind of a chilly May, like late afternoon, early evening, and this butterfly looks pretty fresh. And my guess is it was trying to get warmed up, using the heat of my house and trying to get those wings going. So, again, what brought this butterfly to my yard? Well, I don't know for certain. Everything here is sort of, scientific observation and some speculation as well. But its hosts include cherry trees, ashes, tulip trees. And so when I look around in my yard, I really don't have those necessarily, but I know my neighbor a couple doors down has a tulip tree. I know that my neighbor next door has a black cherry tree, which is encroaching on my property. Its branches come over. So I guess I could sort of kind of claim the black cherry. And our ash trees, oh, I do have a couple ash saplings, but I don't know how they will fare, especially with the emerald ash borer. But, so I do believe, these are some of the reasons that we see this butterfly in our suburban neighborhood. And And so here are a couple pictures. So for each butterfly, I'll try to show some pictures of what those host plants are. So we have the tulip tree here, as well as the black cherry, both of which produce some really beautiful flowers in the spring. And of course, the black cherry also produces fruit, which I know our birds and other animals really enjoy. The next butterfly, this is probably my top one that I have seen in my yard, and it's the banded hair streak. And hair streaks are tiny butterflies. They're about the size of your thumbnail, so maybe about an inch wide. They typically have some really nice patterns on them. And in this case, this banded hair streak landed on some common milkweed that I have near my front porch. And I had seen it earlier in the week and I was like, what is that? I didn't quite have like my glasses on. And then I went outside to see and I scared it away. And so I'd been stalking this butterfly for a couple days, knowing what it was because I had one a few years ago. And it finally reappeared and I was able to photograph it. And its host plants are oaks. Surprise, surprise, that's a keystone species, as well as hickories and black walnut. So I've already mentioned the two giant oak trees that I have in my backyard. My neighbor across the street has a black walnut tree, which she curses every chance she gets. And I recently discovered that my neighbor next to me has a hickory tree. I had to go and inspect that one because I wasn't quite sure from a distance if it was the dreaded tree of heaven, but thankfully it's a hickory tree. So yay us. And I think this butterfly brings home for me the importance of thinking about our collective backyard, right? That, I don't necessarily have, hickories or black walnuts, but my neighbors do. And I'm not going to be able to plant every single tree and shrub in my space. That's just not doable. But together, we can do some wonderful things together to create productive habitats and to increase those populations. And so here are just a couple pictures. I think those of you who live in the northeastern part of the world probably very familiar with these, although oaks are ubiquitous across the United States. We love our shagbark hickory here in Ohio with its telltale bark. And of course, the black walnut, which I understand why people curse, because you could trip over one of those nuts. I know sometimes people have trouble growing things, near or in soil that's near the black walnut. But, in this case, might have just brought that banded hair streak to my yard. So I'm not going to complain. Our next butterfly that has come to my yard is the gray hair streak. Again, this is another tiny butterfly about the size of your thumbnail. And this was photographed nectaring on an aster later in the season. I think I took this picture in October. So, up north, like October is really the very end of butterfly season. And unlike the banded hair streak, it has some different host plants, over 20 of them, in fact, many of which are in the pea family, but also things that may or may not be native, like white clover really isn't native here, and tick trefoil might be native, might not be, depending on the species. And so, again, I have blue false indigo, which is part of the pea family, white clover, which everybody has here, and then tick trefoil, which I brought home from a butterfly survey because its seeds were stuck to my pants and I cleaned them on the front step. So, they say birds are great distributors of seeds, but so are humans. And before I move on to showing those host plants, I want to talk a little bit about the wild indigo dusky wing, which is another butterfly that uses plants in the indigo family or the pea family. And I believe this is a female wild indigo dusky wing. But what's really interesting about this butterfly is it has also adapted to use crown vetch as a host plant. And if you know anything about crown vetch, you know that it was introduced to the United States as a ground cover to control erosion along roadsides. And it really didn't work out as planned. So now we kind of have it everywhere. But this butterfly got me thinking that it has adapted to use this as a host plant, even though it's not native. And so sometimes non-natives can have an unintended benefit. Not everything is black and white. Although, I definitely am a 100% believer in native plants, but I think sometimes, learning about something like this causes me to step back and say, okay, Mary Lynn, you don't have to be like so righteous. Okay, like just relax. If butterflies can pivot, so can you on certain things, and you can have a more open mind for sure. So here we have blue wild indigo, or sometimes called blue false indigo, and This is a plant that I have, or shrub, really. Now it's getting to be like a shrub in my yard, and you can see very clearly why it belongs to the pea family. And then, of course, my tick trefoil volunteer, very close to where I cleaned my pants and my boots. So we'll see. We'll see if that brings some more hair streaks to the yard, if you will. The next butterfly is the summer azure, and this is again about the same size as our hair streaks. And it's a blue butterfly, and I'm a sucker for little blue butterflies. And here in Ohio, we have other azures, but I'm just going to focus on the summer azure because I know that this is the one that's come to my yard. Here it is nectaring on obedient plant, which is a member of the mint family. And if you need something that spreads quickly, this is one of your plants. But I love those purple flowers. They're just so beautiful, and how the bees go in and out, and even butterflies enjoy them, which is really fun, like a snapdragon almost. And its host plants are flowering dogwood, black cherry, which I mentioned that my neighbor has and is kind of floating over into my yard, as well as wingstem and possibly others. Call it a match game, but it's not always a one-to-one, and there's still a lot that scientists are learning about what plants butterflies are using for reproduction. So I always loved seeing wingstem in the wild. It's tall. Sometimes it's taller than me, but I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'3". But it has these bright, beautiful yellow blooms that attract bees. And so I bought a couple plugs for my yard to put against a stand of arborvitaes along the property line. And just a few weeks ago, see, I'm always learning, always, always. I learned that it is a host plant for the summer azure. So this summer, I'm definitely going to be more attentive to see if we have any reproductive activity there. And I also planted, not pictured here, but a couple gray dogwood shrubs, because I listened to John Barber's Shrub Talk, and I'm a shrub disciple. Like, I want more shrubs. I want all the shrubs. And the gray dogwood is also a host for the summer azure, as well as over 100 species of Lepidoptera. So that's butterflies and moths. Um, so that's definitely one of my goals, I would say, as I think about expanding the habitat in my yard and shrinking my lawn, is adding more shrubs, and just because they have such a great benefit. The flowering dogwood, of course, is a really great understory tree or shrub, and has just these elegant blooms in the spring, which I cannot get enough of. Our next butterfly is the Great Spangled Fritillary. Again, this is another butterfly that I was like, I'm never going to see this in my yard. And one day it was here, nectaring on butterfly weed. Um, I had just come back from a butterfly survey, and I was backing up into my garage, and I saw this in my side view mirror. And I was like, oh, full stop, get out of the car, take a picture before it flits away. And what a pleasure. Again, it's that butterfly joy. This is why I plant, or one of the reasons why I do. And its host plants are various violets. Now we got to talk about the Great Spangled Fritillary mom for a moment, because she does not lay her eggs right on the violet leaf. Okay, so let me bring up that picture of the violet leaf. She lays them like nearby. And so when that egg hatches and that caterpillar emerges, it has to go and find the nearest violet so it can start eating. So, I kind of joke. I was like, she's a bad mom, look, she's making her kid like her, work for that. But really, when I think about it, violets are a food source for deer and rabbits and other creatures. And so I think she's doing her little ones a favor, protecting them from predation and giving them the best chance to succeed. So I really love violets. I love their resilience, and I love that they're just popping up everywhere, especially since I've made room for them to pop up. The next butterfly is a pearl crescent, and I suspect that many of us on this call have seen a pearl crescent. They're also another petite butterfly, if you will, maybe an inch wide, sometimes up to an inch and a quarter wide. And you'll notice that they have the same colors as monarch butterflies, black and orange. And just a funny story, and I'm sorry if you've heard this story before, but it just always cracks me up, is that we were on one of our butterfly surveys at Terra Vista, and we're going up, we're just starting, and this lady's coming down the hill, and she says, "Oh my gosh, I saw all these baby monarchs," and she was very, very excited. And no one in our group had the heart to tell her that those were not baby monarchs, that they were pearl crescents. Because as we know, butterflies emerge fully grown as adults. But, good for her. She was noticing butterflies, and, maybe at some point, it'll come to her that those are not monarchs. But anyway, it just makes me laugh. And sometimes we'll be doing a survey, and I'll say to Bernie, who's recording, "Oh, baby monarch," and we all have a good laugh. But pearl crescents they love asters. And asters are an abundant grouping of plants. And so just in my yard, and these are only the ones I photographed because I have more than this, believe it or not. Philadelphia fleabane, which has been a wonderful volunteer for me this year. Um, Broad-leaved or narrow or zigzag goldenrod, sometimes it's called that, is also in the aster family. Just learned that. I'm learning so much. And then New England aster, which a lot of us here up north are familiar with, that blooms, later in the year. And then I have like right now popping up in my garden bed these other like I don't know, they're kind of ugly looking asters. Like their leaves are just kind of sticking out all over the place, and they haven't flowered yet because that'll happen later, and like I just want to rip them out because they just are not aesthetically pleasing. I'm like, "No, no, no. This is an aster. This is good. That's what that gray hair streak was on." One of these like asters that, I haven't been able to identify down to the species level. So they're kind of in that ugly duckling stage of growth. And so I encourage you, if you have things in your yard that you do not know what they are, like get your phone out, take a picture, use Google Lens, or the iPhone has a built-in plant identifier, or iNaturalist or Seek, or any of the apps that are out there, and at least try to get an idea of what it is before you go crazy like me and want to pull it out. The monarch. What more do we need to say about the monarch? She just speaks for herself in her regalness. And we all know that monarchs only use milkweeds for their host plants. And so I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with this. This is a male monarch, actually, and you can tell by the spots, the two little spots in the vein down toward the bottom of the butterfly. I have had a female monarch laying eggs pretty consistently over the last couple weeks or so, but it's a hard knock life out there, and I think the caterpillars have gotten eaten up by other things. Um, so in my yard, at one point, I had all three of these. The common milkweed, of course, um, butterfly weed, which is a great native plant in Ohio. We really don't have anything else like it, that's just so vibrant. And swamp milkweed. My swamp milkweed did not come back, so RIP swamp milkweed. Maybe it will return next year. Not quite sure what happened there. Again, I'm an amateur. Everything that I've learned about native gardening, I've pretty much taught myself. And, sometimes things just don't grow or they don't grow the way we want, or they're in the wrong spot. So I just have to remember to be patient. But if you're in other parts of the country, I know we have people from various parts. Make sure that you have a milkweed that's an ecotype that's native to your area. So your university extension office, your master gardeners, your native plant dealers can help you identify those. because it's very tempting, especially like here in the Northeast, to be like, ooh, tropical milkweed, ooh, hairy ball milkweed, which is a real name, by the way. Did not make that up. But you definitely want things that are local to your area. Next, we have our peck skipper. So actually, the next couple butterflies, these are what we consider grass skippers. It's a broad category. Sometimes people call them little brown jobs if they cannot be identified. But in this case, they're called that because their host plants are lots of different kinds of grasses. And so the peck skipper, here it is on blue flag iris in my yard. There's actually two of them. And I think skippers are often overlooked because they're tiny. They're, usually kind of brown or orange, and people are like, oh, that's a moth. Nothing wrong with moths. I love moths, but they are butterflies, and we should give them that respect that they're due. And I love these butterflies because they're tiny, and they've got that pattern inside that kind of looks like chiclets, that yellow pattern. If you squint, it looks like chiclets. At least it does for me. But the fun fact I want to share with you today is that peck skippers sometimes use crabgrasses for their host plant. And I'm like, this ugly stuff that I've been trying to eradicate from my beds, you're using that as a host plant? Like you don't, it's not native? Like, okay. So again, another example how nature adapts and how it gives us pause sometimes. That yes, even though this technically does not belong, it is providing some sort of benefit for some peck skippers. But I assume that if there was something, more readily available that they like, that they would probably choose that. But now I'm going to be really conflicted on when this starts to take over my garden beds on what to do. So just, pray for me, send good vibes. I make the right decision. No, just kidding. Our next butterfly is the little glassy wing. It is also a tiny butterfly, probably about an inch wide or an inch long or so. Uses various grasses, including purple top. And this is a butterfly again that I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's in my yard, right? Like I see this all the time at Terra Vista and other places. And I just felt so much joy to see this nectaring on my common milkweed. Just such a lovely surprise. And maybe it's not uncommon, but to me it was. And I think, that's the important thing to remember. No matter where you are in your nature journey, just enjoy those moments of surprise because that's going to drive the passion for what we do. And it's going to help smooth out some of those edges when it's like, oh, this plant didn't grow, or all my caterpillars got eaten. Um, and I am going to show you some purple top grass in just a minute. But before we do, I want to conclude with our Zabulon skipper, which is also another grass skipper, of course, as you can see by the host plants. And this butterfly is pretty common in the United States. I actually saw one in Costa Rica a couple years ago, and I said to our guide, I was like, Ricardo, is this a Zabulon skipper? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, wow. So it does have some range. And this is another one that you probably will find in your yard. And what's cool about the Zabulon skipper is that it's sexually dimorphic, which just means that the males and the females have look different. A lot like, kind of how cardinals, you have the males are bright red and the females are kind of that drab, grayish brown. And so we have the male on the left. It's got some brown around the edges. It's got that bright yellow in the middle with a couple brown dots. And on the right, we have the female with its caramel color and that cream line along the edge of the wing. And these were actually in my yard at the same time. So was there canoodling happening? We don't know for sure. But this is exactly the kind of thing that I want to see. And that's why I do what I do in terms of planting. So here is an example of purple top grass, which I don't currently have. I have seen it out in the field at Terra Vista. But I think in addition to, I know in addition to adding more shrubs to my little kingdom here, I would also like to add more grasses and sedges because they're kind of like the unsung heroes in the pollinator world. And I know that Peggy Spaeth just, made a comment on someone's Facebook post in our Heights Pollinator Pathway group. Someone was asking, what to plant to attract pollinators. And she said, don't forget the sedges and the grasses. And she's absolutely right. Um, so as we kind of, wrap up our time here together, I hope you enjoyed my little tour of yard bugs. I'm a proud butterfly mom, and I will talk to anyone who will listen. So thank you for sticking by here. Um, if anything, I have learned over the last, 10 to 12 to 13 years is really to appreciate supporting the whole ecosystem. In this talk, I was like, oh, it's like a match game. I thought, oh, maybe we'll play a match game on Zoom, right? But it's really more than that. It's not just about those one-to-one relationships. Of course, I want to see pretty butterflies, but I also know the importance of caterpillars as a major food source for young birds. And as we were talking about before the session started, other insects that don't care, for instance, how monarch caterpillars taste. So while I am trying to play a match game of sorts as I think about, what to add and where to put it, whether that's a plant or, a tree or a shrub, but what will really truly support the web of life. And so Doug Tallamy, if any of you have read his books or heard him speak, of course, talks about the keystone species. And as a Pennsylvania native, I have to say, I really love the keystone. It's that stone in the arch that keeps that arch standing and strong. And the same is true of our keystone species. When we think about oak trees, for instance, that's like probably the number one keystone species. And you see here how many butterfly species, at least the ones that overwinter in Ohio, that it supports. Not to mention the moths, not to mention all the other, animals and insects that use that tree for, acorns and habitat and all of these things. So, I'm so glad that I became butterfly obsessed because it's like a gateway drug. It's led me to so many other pieces of wisdom and an understanding of our natural world. So I've listed a couple other keystone species here and which butterflies use them. We do have a couple listed butterflies in Ohio that are endangered, like the dreamy dusky wing. I've not seen one here in Ohio, but I have seen them in Pennsylvania. And of course, some more host plants. So these wouldn't be considered keystone species, but they're still really important. And some of them have been mentioned today, like hickories and violets and sedges and asters. I even put parsley here, or things in the carrot family, because I know some people, they're like, oh my goodness, I have there's a caterpillar eating all my parsley in the garden. And unfortunately, I have planted things in this family, not just parsley, and I have not seen a black swallowtail caterpillar. So one can hope. Um, and then, the other thing is, I know it's July and it's hot and we're sweating. And it's kind of hard to think about winter, except when you're fantasizing about, I wish it were winter because I'm so hot. But in a couple months, we'll be thinking about what we want to do with our garden beds and our land. And I would totally encourage you to think like a butterfly. Um, because, in addition to, just, planting and being conscious of what happens in, spring, summer, and fall, we got to think about winter too. In Ohio, we have about 80 species of butterflies that overwinter in all stages. Adults, believe it or not, as eggs, as caterpillars, and as chrysalises. And although butterflies do produce glycol, which is like an antifreeze that keeps their cells from bursting, they also need safe havens. So, brush piles, leaves, stems, any place that will help them to be insulated from the cold over the winter. Now, if you're in Florida, you probably don't have this problem. But those of us in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Maine and other colder climates definitely do. So embrace that mess. I don't know about you, but this is my excuse to be lazy. I don't want to blow all those leaves out to the front. I don't want to bag them. I don't want to do anything. I just want to leave them. And of course, trying to delay those spring cleanups until temps are consistently above 50 day and night. Again, I've heard people push back on this and say, but there are other things that are living under those leaves. You're absolutely right. So this year I was like, you know what? I'm going to clean out some of my beds just a little bit, just enough to give those plants that need a little more light, some room for that to happen. But yeah, I see, okay, I got spiders, I got beetles, I got salamanders. So now I'm just like, I'm just leaving it. But oak leaves take forever to break down. So, you just kind of have to live with the mess too. And that can be hard sometimes. And it can be especially hard if you live in have an HOA or you have neighbors who are like, I'm going to call the police on you. So we have a lot of advocacy work to do in terms of our communities as well, so that other people, will see the good work that we're doing and why it's so important. And then my final piece of wisdom that I've learned is planting natives and perennials in the fall, 100%, 10 of 10. The ones that I planted in a new bed last fall are thriving, like even more so than plants I've had for 2 or 3 years that I planted, in the spring or the summer. So, a lot of times we're thinking, oh, winter, fall, it's a time when things are dying and all of that. But when you plant in the fall, it gives that plant a really good chance to get settled and established. And then when spring comes, it's like, woo, so exciting. So I know we're almost at time here, and I apologize if I talk too long. Like I said, I'm obsessed and I can't help myself. But I'd love to connect with you. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Flickr, not so much, but iNaturalist, all at ML Delfino. And if you would like, I do have some bonus content, a link to overwintering butterflies here in Ohio. It's even broken down by which stages butterflies overwinter in, and of course, what their host plants are. So I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm happy to stick around and answer some questions. And yeah, let's just keep up the good work, all of us. We all need each other to do this work. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Marilyn. Excellent program. And I don't know that there's really any questions other than there's people are heaping praise on you and in your direction. So very well done. I mean, your photography is fabulous. Your passion just, it's contagious. So we all want to run out and plant those native trees. I got to ask you, when you were prospecting for your Cleveland Heights estate, was it the presence of 100-year-old oak tree that sealed the deal for you, or?
Oh, yes. House hunting in 2021 was a pretty wild experience if anyone had done that, because inventory was just flying and people were bidding, 20, 30, 40,000 over and cash offers. And but when I found this house, there was a lot to love about it. And when I went into the backyard, I was like, sold, sold, sold.
Oh,
Um, I mentioned growing up in Scranton and not, nature not really being a part of my story like it is now. And, I kind of laugh because my dad's like, I hate trees, so it really bugs him every time he comes here. And it's, there's that part too. But yeah, I mean, the oak trees just provide so much benefit. And, even during these hot days, I know that that tree is offering valuable shade and, keeping the house cooler and keeping energy costs down. So there's so much to love about oak trees, especially mature ones.
wonderful, wonderful. Um, I also love the fact that you we're so glad that you became butterfly obsessed and shared the obsession with us, because I think that many people, if they weren't butterfly obsessed already,
They
I mean,
will
I
be
think that
now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's just you, and you make it such a clear connection between the host plants and how we should be thinking more holistically. I got to ask though, as you do this,
Mhm.
because I have to employ the word, this is like a ministry for you. I mean,
Mm.
this is you are bringing joy when you're interacting with your neighbors who might not be butterfly obsessed. Do you find that there is some surefire method that gains their attention, that you can get them to open up their ideas to the value of what you're doing, and at least maybe they'll consider doing something similar?
Yeah, haven't been super successful with my immediate neighbors for various reasons, but my next door neighbor, and they're just super busy people, but when I had some caterpillars last year, I was like, hey, like, come on over and look at this, So I think sometimes, like with many things in life, that seeing it, experiencing it, can kind of change your heart a little bit and,
Yeah.
make you think about what you could do. And it might just be one little thing, and that's okay because if everyone did one little thing, we could create an amazing web of habitat, which I think is what Talamy, has convinced people of. So I keep trying, I just try to share that love and that joy, and but I'm not like banging on the door like you must do this. I think you
Yeah.
catch more flies with honey than anything else. But that's my hope, or that I'll be at a point, where some of my plants are, can truly be divided and shared perhaps, and
Hmm.
um, so we'll see. It's just I never stop.
Well, that's
And
great.
and it is
And you
like a
shouldn't.
ministry. It's I think for those of us who, have a spiritual tradition, this definitely connects us to many of the creation stories that are part of those traditions, and just taking a look around at the world and going, wow, isn't this magnificent and marvelous? And what can we do to continue to be good stewards of the earth that is a gift to us?
You're here. And part of the gospel, if you will, to continue the analogy that we subscribe to, is that, your yard can in fact make a difference and will make a difference if you
Absolutely.
if you create, a healthy biodiverse habitat with native plants, and native species, that in fact that if you do it, and then your neighbor does it, and then everyone does it, you create
Hmm.
corridors and swaths of habitat that are, really significant. And
Hmm.
it's the one thing that we all can do because it's our yard, unless you've
Yes.
got some zoning restrictions against it. The
Yes.
fact that it's what we can do.
Yeah.
We had a question about Victoria was asking, can you speak to whether maple trees are as friendly as oaks? We've had to take two large oak trees down to rot due to rot.
Kujina, all the way from Portland, Maine. Um, I'm still learning a lot, I have to say, and I don't know if were maples listed. I don't think they were listed on the keystone species. I mean, I think my thing is, oaks, you get a lot of bang for your buck, right? But any native tree, I think, provides a benefit, So yes, plant for what will attract, native, butterflies and moths and birds and all of that. But also plant for what you like. If you like a maple tree and it's native to your area, go for it because we know there are species that are using it and we know it has benefits. But if you'd like offline, we could certainly look that up and see. We could get some real scientific numbers on that.
Mhm.
But I would say rather than, getting a tree that has roots in, another country, you want one that, has its
Right.
roots here because everything has co-evolved, with those plants. So
Yes. Don't plant a Norway maple.
actually had one on my tree lawn here that died. Blessedly, it died. And the city came in and took it down. But yeah, some maples are better than others for sure
Yeah,
and
yeah.
provide
Some
more
some
benefit.
maples are bad. I mean, they don't belong
Yes.
here, and they're bad.
Yes.
Bad. Um, I think that's all of the questions. Again, I just want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank you for a brilliant presentation. Again, You are so inspiring to hear, and you've got such a gift as a communicator. I mean, it's wonderful. It's wonderful you're speaking to your passion, but
Yeah.
it's great that you've got the tools to be able to share it so
Yeah.
effectively and so articulately.
And I'm still learning. So I'm not an expert, and maybe I don't know if I'll ever get to the expert level, but sometimes I think I don't want to be the expert. I always want to have that curiosity. So
Well,
that's
and
my,
just think about
yeah.
so many of the great naturalists. They were not
Yeah.
experts necessarily. They
Yeah.
were just students, lifetime
Yeah.
students of nature.
Yes. And I think
I think
sometimes
that's,
when you study something professionally, it takes out some of that awe and that joy.
yeah,
Not always, but sometimes. So, but thank you to everyone. It's been an awesome afternoon with you all.
excellent. Well, thank you all for participating. And just a reminder, August 12th at noon, we will be assembling here online again for In the Garden with Some Good Fronds, Garden Worthy Native Ferns, presented by Steve McKee. Thank you for dialing in. Encourage you to again go to ohionativeplants.org and learn more about this organization and the good work it's doing. And thank you much. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.